Alrighty, well, we will jump right in. Thanks again, folks, for being here. Once again, my name is Tyler Renner. My pronouns are he, him, his. I serve as Senior Director of Communications for PATH. PATH is a statewide organization dedicated to ending homelessness for individuals, families, and communities. In Santa Barbara, we operate an interim housing site, and we offer case management, employment support, rapid rehousing, and connections to permanent supportive housing. I'm really pleased to be here as your moderator for this event in recognition of World Homeless Day. Here in Santa Barbara County, a coalition of providers have come together to shed light on homelessness in our community, to uplift the stories of real people who have experienced homelessness, and to provide you all with ways to be parts of the solution. We have a pledge that we will invite folks to sign on to at the end of this call that has a lot of great resources for people as well. Tonight, we have a panel of people with lived experience and a representative from the County of Santa Barbara to give us a little bit of an intro before we dive into a Q&A with our folks with lived experience. So lived experience and centering people's voices who have experienced homelessness is crucial to our work. It helps us understand the complexities of homelessness, what the solutions are, and I hope that it builds empathy because more of us are closer to homelessness than we may think. Tonight, the theme is homelessness. It's not what you think. So many folks may have misconceptions or stereotypes or beliefs about what homelessness looks like, how it impacts individuals, and what it looks like in Santa Barbara. We hope that tonight really helps you break down some of those misconceptions and hear more about the realities from people who have experienced it. I want to give a special thank you to our providers and our organizations that came together to recognize today, including SB ACT, the Santa Barbara Foundation, CityNet, Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, and the City of Goleta, in addition to PATH. Together, we created a video campaign, Everyone Has a Story, The Real Faces of Homelessness, to show real people and real stories of our neighbors experiencing homelessness. Those videos can be found on SB ACT's website, and we want to give a special thank you to City Council member Oscar Gutierrez, who created those videos for us. Now, to really level set this evening, and before we go into our panel discussion with our folks with lived experience, I'd like to welcome Kimberlee Albers. She is the Homeless Assistance Program Manager with the County of Santa Barbara in the Housing and Community Development Division. So I have a series of questions to sort of get us going, but Kimberlee, if you wanted to open and maybe introduce yourself and your role at the county, then we'll sort of dive into, you know, setting the scene for understanding the landscape of homelessness here.
All right. As you said, Tyler, I'm Kimberlee Albers. I officially serve as the Homelessness Assistance Program Manager at the County of Santa Barbara. But I'm really someone who's just passionate about ending homelessness in our community. And I was actually maybe going to just share a brief personal story. Is that okay? Or
Oh, please, yeah.
everybody has a story. So, me included. And so kind of sometimes I don't think I often get a chance to share like how I came to this work. And so I just was going to quick go up and let's see if I can make this happen really fast. I know time is limited. Oh, sorry. There we go. Can you see a picture of me with someone? Is that okay? Great. So my journey with I guess working in homelessness really began in 2006. And I was actually attending some outreach events through my church. And I met this beautiful woman who's standing with me. And we happen to be, our birthdays are exactly a month apart. And we have the same initials, KIA. And our walks through life could not have been more different. The challenges that she went through as I really got to know her. She's today one of my very best friends. And walking with her side by side as friend and support and mentor is truly where I learned to do this work in government and different things, right? Obviously, you have to learn a lot about systems, but all of this work really begins with coming alongside someone to say, I'm with you, I'll walk with you. And so Kristen is now, she was living in Kern when I met her now 18 years ago, and has been housed and reunited with her family. And this is actually at her affordable housing complex in the Boston area, looking out over some where they're growing cranberries in that area when I visited her about a year ago. And so even now she's been housed for, 10 years, a lot of things going well in her life. We both face challenges. And so we still rely on each other to walk with each other in our journey through life together. So I just wanted to start and just kind of give that framing. I don't often talk about kind of how I wound up in this work. And so there's about 12 women like Kristen that just really touched my life as I was getting into this work. And so I think what I was kind of was asked about to do today is just, sorry, I'm having all kinds of trouble here, is just kind of talk a little bit about homelessness in general, especially on the South Coast. But and so did you want me to jump in, Tyler, or did you want to ask?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay.
If you have it
Okay.
prepared, that's even better.
Okay. So I think, just really briefly, because I think we really want to talk about stories tonight, is just, I think there's some things going really well in our system, and that's getting people housed, right? Our service providers have truly become experts in moving people from the streets or shelter into housing. And so we're housing literally hundreds more than we ever have. But and that's because we've made major investments, right, in both interim and permanent housing beds. And so there's more housing available for people to go into. But what we're also seeing at that same time is that we're struggling with returns to homelessness, that once someone is in permanent housing, we need to get better at making sure that they have the supports to be able to stay in housing. And then we also are seeing the number of people falling into homelessness, right? That their life circumstances change and they wind up losing their rental or have to leave a place that they've been staying. And so even though we're housing more than ever, our numbers have been going up because what we call the inflow, right? The people who are actually falling into homelessness, that number is greater than the number that we can house. And so I think sort of the good news is, right, that we have more housing than ever before. And the bad news is we need to get better at giving people the support to keep them there and really, thriving in the new housing. But also we need to figure out how, right, to prevent people from losing their housing and falling into, experiencing homelessness. But happy to answer any other questions as well.
Yeah, thank you. Could you share any statistics around homelessness, sort of giving us an idea of the scale of the challenges?
Yes. So I did have some number slides, and then I was like, no, I'm not doing that tonight. But I will share a little bit. I think people think about 2,000 people are experiencing homelessness in Santa Barbara because that's what they hear on the annual point in time count. But the reality is in any given year, we actually have over 4,000. Last year, it was about 4,300 people that we knew were actually experiencing homelessness, because the point in time counts on a single day. And throughout the year, right, we annualize that to where we really understand how many people are actually coming through the system and need our assistance throughout the year. So that equates to over like 2,200 people being served in emergency shelters, 1,500 people engaged in street outreach, 1,900 people like newly assessed into our coordinated entry system. So I think maybe the thing is, I think the number is usually much bigger than people realize, and not right now. We're actually doing a little bit better right now, but for about the last 2 years, prior to about the last 9 months, it was about a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every person that was transitioning out of homelessness, 2 people were falling into homelessness, which really made it hard to keep the progress going.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any trends that you're seeing about specific demographics, maybe more seniors? Is there an age demographic that we're seeing rise, or what does that look like over the last few
Yeah.
years?
So we are seeing an increase in the number of families with minor children, that I think people don't really realize, right, is still such a significant part of this, the population. And so just to give you an idea, it's about 30% of people experiencing homelessness in our community today are families with minor children. And so I think that's always, really important for people to realize. And the other area of real concern and growth is we're seeing more and more people living in their vehicles. And in that population of persons living in their vehicles, we see sort of a disproportionate increase, in the number of seniors, over 62, families again with minor children, and the newest trend is, undocumented, or just people who are, monolingual Spanish speaking, and so have had some challenges, maybe either doing the mediation with the landlord, or we're already on the, maybe in substandard housing that's now has been part of some of those rent evictions that we hear about. So we're still trying to dive into that a little bit more, but definitely seeing those with Hispanic and Latino heritage rising in our numbers. In fact, we just talked about that at a meeting today, that now they're overrepresented in the number experiencing homelessness, where in years past, because culturally often they're can be more willing to double up, that was not the case.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you for that information. Now, we know that everyone's episode of homelessness is unique and their journey to housing is unique as well. But what are some of the typical services that are offered for people experiencing homelessness, from outreach? Say, how do you go from being unsheltered to then being connected in housing? What could that process look like?
Yeah, so there's a few different gateways into the system that hopefully, folks are realizing. So we have what's called the coordinated entry system, which is attempting to match, people who are experiencing homelessness with the right housing intervention. And so you don't have to be enrolled with a provider, but I'll tell everyone on the call, it sure does help, because even though we've made lots of strides in trying to improve the system, it is very hard to navigate on your own. I think that's a, truly a fault of our system, is you need a street outreach worker, you need a case manager if you're in the shelter. If they're asking you for documents, or asking you, questions, it's truly because that's how our response system works, right? To get to that housing match. And so trying to, be as responsive and engaged, as possible with whoever you're working with is really, really important in our system. And so once someone is actually like engaged in street outreach, and we have all their documentation that we'll need for, potentially like a subsidized housing placement, either through what we call rapid rehousing, which is like short or medium term rental assistance, or permanent housing. Our stats tell us it takes about 126 days, to move in from that sort of engaged in services, which sounds short probably to a lot of people, because oftentimes people have been, on the streets, or in shelter, or not shelter, but have been out a long time before they're really engaged in services. And we have had more housing, like I mentioned, than recently, so that number may seem low to folks, but that is consistently what we see.
Gotcha. Homelessness is in the news fairly often. I think folks who, may not be as plugged into this issue as, maybe you or I are because we work in this arena, they may have seen the Supreme Court's decision around the Grants Pass case. They may have seen Gavin Newsom, ordering encampments to be cleared. What do you make of these sort of, recent news headlines, and what does that impact really look like locally?
Yeah, so it's going to take all of us, right, to voice that, um, moving there. It's just not, it's moving people around rather than actually relocating them to shelter or housing. It is just ineffective, right, at the end of the day. As well as, can be very traumatic. And so as of right now, right, the county encampment response protocol very clearly states that we need to be offering a shelter bed, that is the effective and solution-oriented way when an encampment does need to be resolved or cleared. I will say that we have some very dangerous encampments in our community, right? In creeks, in rivers, in different places where, we truly are acting that, we believe it'll save lives, right? We had a death in the Santa Maria riverbed in the storms in 2023. So there will be displacement, right, as we try and prioritize those that are most at risk. But definitely want people to be engaged and hopefully, working with that outreach worker so that they can move to a safer location prior to any relocation.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for that information. Before we go into our panel, I would just love to hear from you what gives you hope. You sounds like you've been doing this work for a considerable amount of time, and many folks can see homelessness as a daunting issue. It's been ongoing. It's a systemic issue that has really existed in California for many decades, right? So what sort of gives you hope working in this space?
The people on this call, right? And the people doing this work. So I think the providers, for one, I think sometimes they get pretty beat up. Everyone has a bad story to tell about a provider. There'll be a bad story to tell about me. There'll be a bad story to tell about Landon, right? We all have, things that happen that we wish on our worst day maybe didn't happen. So I think I am so amazed by the people doing this work in this community. Like I said, they are doing more housing than ever, and for the resiliency of those that are experiencing homelessness, and that even though we fail them so often, so they are willing to re-engage and give us a second chance and help us walk with them either through, like I said, case management or outreach to hopefully a true housing solution.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and for opening with a personal anecdote as well. It's really important to know that there's dedicated, compassionate people in this work, and we're really all in it together. So I really appreciate you giving us that information and that personal connection, because that's, really helpful and inspiring for us. So thank you so much for your time. We'll move on to our panelists and get that discussion going. So for folks who may have just joined, that was Kimberlee Albers from the County of Santa Barbara. She was really giving us some context about homelessness in the community, what solutions are offered. And now we're going to go into our panel of people with lived experience. I do want to give a notification here that some of the stories or details that you may hear from folks that are sharing may involve challenging topics: trauma, violence, perhaps substance use or mental health challenges, or other difficult topics. We want to be real and honest, and everyone's story is their own. But I do just want to give that caveat and really invite our panelists to share as much as they're comfortable sharing. And we really appreciate everyone being on the call to really be tuned into that. So we have three great panelists. I will let each of them introduce themselves, but I'll just name them first. We have Robert Evans, Lynda Murray, and Melinda Maysonet. So we'll just begin with each of you offering an introduction about yourself and really what motivated you to be part of this panel. And maybe we'll start with Lynda.
Hello, I'm Lynda Murray. I am an advocate for the homeless, and particularly for senior homeless, as I'm 75 years old. And I went to school in the Puget Sound area in Washington State, but I went to City College here, and I went to the University of California at Santa Barbara here. I got a BA in studio art, which didn't help me work. So I went back to Ellen Hancock and got a certified nursing assistant certificate so that I could work. And I have worked in 2 hospitals, actually 3 hospitals, and finally opted for home care, as I was already a little bit older than most of the people. I already had a child of grade school age. My daughter actually, well, we should let the other people introduce themselves. I'm sorry, I don't want to talk and talk.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Lynda. Melinda.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Melinda, and the reason that I'm here today is, of course, because I've experienced homelessness. And the reason that I'm passionate about working in this field at the present moment is because of all of the help that I received. But I also want to offer people hope in that while we do not have one magical solution to end homelessness, and it's pretty much been a global problem these days, I do know one thing that I'd like to share, that what we can do is that we can be more kind, more informed, and more generous in how we think, what we say, and what we do, and that it truly takes the village for all of us to work together to find various solutions that can help chip away at the problem.
Beautifully said. Robert?
Hi, my name is Robert. I'm a longtime Santa Barbara resident. I've been here 42 years. I moved here when I first got out of college from CSU Chico, where I got degrees in business and psychology. And I've actually been an engineer most of my life. I fell into that by accident. I got into the computer industry very early and rode the tidal wave, as they say. And I had a mental breakdown. Well, actually, I had a second mental breakdown 40 years ago, or 25 years ago, that never got caught until I caught it about 6 years ago and started getting better. Um, so I'm here just because I've seen so much in the 20 years I've been on the streets that I figured I probably have maybe a few words of wisdom for those out there who are working on getting us off the streets, because I've dealt with them over the past 20 years.
Yeah,
That's
thank
me.
you for sharing that. Yeah, I think all of you have shared that you have lived experience of homelessness. If you wouldn't mind sort of maybe sharing a little bit about what that looked like for you, because as we know, homelessness can be many different types of things. So, Melinda?
Sure.
Yeah,
I
went from being
Melinda or Linda?
Oh, sorry, Melinda, we could go with you.
Okay.
Then we'll go to
All right.
Linda.
When I became homeless, I still had my vehicle, so I started living in my vehicle, and it was very foreign to me. I'm originally from the East Coast, so that's not something that you see happen very often on the East Coast. So that was a very foreign concept to me. The whole homelessness thing was new to me. I didn't know anything about it. I felt terrified. I felt afraid. I felt like a lot of shame because I felt like I was doing something wrong. And are the cops going to harass me for being in my car overnight? I didn't know where to park, what to do. And so, of course, the first thing I wanted to do was go to a shelter. And when I got to the shelter, I had to wait 3 days for an available bed. But when I saw how the shelter was organized, and for those 3 days, I was observing the people that were coming there. And unfortunately, a lot of the people had mental health issues or drug addiction issues. And I did not feel safe at all. So I stayed in my car. And it was very challenging to constantly be in a hypervigilant state, be in a fearful state, be in a state of experiencing shame and a little bit of hopelessness, and just finding help and assistance with all these different programs, and because now I'm homeless, I don't know anybody. I'm seeing people having other issues in the street. Of course, you really don't talk to anyone. You keep to yourself. So after a while, it's kind of like this community where, okay, all right, yeah, she's all right. We've seen her, we've observed her, she's okay. And then little by little, people would talk to me and share information with me. And of course, I developed a routine where every morning I had to find a bathroom somewhere, usually at the park, to try to clean myself up a bit. I would go to the library and spend time at the library, job hunting, looking at different programs, exploring different programs. And finally, I ran into the navigation activities at the parking lot. And that's where I really started to get more information about housing and different programs. I found out about safe parking, and they assigned me to a safe place to park, which was such a blessing. There was a bathroom available, there was security, there was cameras, it was safe, and I could park there from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then I would strategize what the rest of my day was like. I found part-time jobs that I could do, living in the car, delivering hot meals to seniors, working at the children's shelter, which is how I got into this work. And, to earn enough money to maintain my vehicle, because that was my home now. So it was a very eye-opening and challenging experience. And I had to fall back on everything that I knew, working previously as a therapist and as a coach. I became my own personal coach and therapist to maintain my mental health, so that I didn't have a mental breakdown, so that I didn't fall apart, so that I didn't lose hope. And realizing that I had to actively seek out the support. And I was happy to find so many available programs. And then the next challenge became, okay, well, now I'm part of this program. I can find the place. I'm excited. My health took a beating. It suffered. And so, okay, now I can find a place. I can get healthy again. I can start working again, build my life again. But now I can't find an apartment because no one will give me one, even though I have a voucher, right? Because of the stigma that people that are homeless have problems and stay away from them and they're not safe. And so it took a long time to find that one landlord that was willing to say, okay, well, let me find out about this person and let me give them an opportunity. And he's an approved landlord for one of these housing programs. And I was finally able to get into a really nice place in a safe neighborhood with amazing neighbors. My health is doing a lot better. I'm starting to work again, and I'm rebuilding my life. And that's my story.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Really appreciate you sharing that.
I can attest. I was in a car for the first couple of years of my homelessness. As a matter of fact, when I went a little bit nuts there, I actually had a good chunk of money, and I spent a year and a half driving all around the United States. I put on 180,000 miles. And to show you how psychotic I was, at one point, my goal was to drive every interstate in the United States.
Wow.
So and my psychosis shifted so many times during the 20 years that until it shifted to something that helped get out. Uh, and it went unrecognized. I mean, I told people all the things I did, and it was like, well, it's just because of your drinking. And that was just that was a offshoot of my main problem. It wasn't my main problem. I mean, been drinking when I was, an executive and an engineer and all sorts of things like that. But I was a functioning alcoholic, basically, a pretty high functioning one too. Um, at one point, I was the senior network technician for both North and South America for Ericsson. So I really performed well at that sort of thing. Uh, but when I cracked, it just went out the door, and I was drinking, a gallon of booze a day. And I also had some severe health problems that were caused by the drinking, And I used to weigh 220 pounds. Actually, I used to weigh 235 pounds and was bench pressing 350 pounds. And that was when I was 23 years old. And I just got my first job. So, but now I'm 145 pounds because of operations and things like that. And my knees are happy, but the rest of me took a while to get used to being this small. And like I said, my psychosis kind of changed to where I wanted to be out in the woods and I wanted to be way away from everybody. And I knew I had to get healthy to do it. So I stopped drinking and I started working out intensely for about 8 months. And I actually was starting to get better. I was reading all the old books that I used for guidance in my lifetime. Top of them was Book of Five Rings. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Uh, it's actually required reading for all Japanese business managers, if you weren't aware of that. And I was so pleased. I can remember this vividly. I realized that one day I was becoming myself again, and then I thought I better get some help. And that's when I turned after you know, 18, 19 years of being on the streets to getting professional help, and I moved along quite well. And and I was very active in my uh, recovery because one of my majors had been psychology, and I'd actually been studying counseling and was in the graduate program. I was counseling other patients then, and I decided I didn't want to listen to people tell me their problems for the rest of my life. And I was, fortunately, I was working on a business degree at the same time, so I got out of that and wound up working in computers for some reason. Well, actually, I know the reason. Here's another. I've been psychotic all my life, by the way, is what they're saying, and they said I just was able to control it, and I can show proof of that. I took an assembly language class in college because a guy bet me $100 in a bottle of tequila that I couldn't pass the class. And that's probably how I got into the computer industry because I just put it on my resume as an offshoot. And when I was first interviewing for jobs, I wanted to get something in finance because that was one of my specialties in business. But I wound up going to the computer science. They saw that and they just go, "Boom, computer science department."
Mm-hmm.
But I have no regrets about that. But it was an odd turn of events for me.
Right. Thank you for giving us some of that insight. Lynda, do you want to share maybe about your experience of homelessness and, sort of what you went through, whatever you're comfortable sharing?
Yes, thank you. I guess I lived in a gated community in Santa Barbara County in Lompoc for seniors. And I had a comfortable little apartment. Both of my parents have passed, of course, and many of my family have passed. My significant other, Mr. Murray, we were married at once. We got divorced. Then we got back together. We didn't get married the second time. He died, and I missed my daughter so much. I was so lonely, and she was the only one left. And she had been homeless for 2 decades here in Santa Barbara. And so I gave up my housing willingly. I chose to. It was a terrible mistake. And I went to live with my sister-in-law in Carpinteria and share the expenses in the condo she owns. And at that time, my granddaughter's father died. And he raised my granddaughter. My daughter was not able to in her alcoholism. And they sent her to me. Well, I could not have her in the condo where I was at in Carpinteria. And so I went back to Lompoc and I rented a house from my cousin for a very low price. And I had my granddaughter for a very short time. She was bigger than me and smarter than me. and very techy. She could do anything on the phone and the computer. And I could barely make phone calls, which is kind of still the case with me. But she got placed with cousins in Escondido, with very good resources, who also understand technology and the raising of children, so that she wouldn't be with Granny running wild in the streets, because Granny doesn't know what she's doing. And so I then was basically ousted from my family. I was beat up, but I was beat up by a family member, a female family member, who was a very young person in her 30s and outweighed me by a tremendous amount of money. I mean, pounds. And she beat me up. And I basically had to leave. And I took my two little dogs, who are the ambassadors who kept me alive. And I went down to the churchyard and slept by a dumpster with my two little dogs. And then I did contact my daughter, my homeless daughter in Santa Barbara. And somehow she got one of her homeless friends with a car to come up and get me and bring me back to Santa Barbara. And so I did get to see my daughter, but I ended up living at the train station, at the Amtrak station, and sleeping under that historical train. I was 72 years old. This wasn't the greatest living situation. Eventually, I found that I discovered through the various other homeless people and wannabe gangsters that hang out down there, that there was a rescue mission and I could go there. And so I did go there, and I did eventually get in. And I went from 110 pounds to 82 pounds because I walked every day for 8 hours, and I took care of my little dogs, which saved my life. And I must say, there's probably some of you here tonight are probably some of the kind people that helped me, because people did help me. People pulled their cars over and gave me a can of dog food and $5 or $20 or whatever they could, food or clothing. People helped me constantly before I actually found navigation services to help me. I became very ill. I got bacterial pneumonia, and I was in the hospital a couple of times, and eventually I went, the hospital placed me in the PATH shelter. And the PATH shelter had a recuperative care program that basically saved my life. And yes, they let me have my two little dogs there, and they slept under my bed, and I slept on my bed. And they went everywhere and did everything with me. And because there were so many people in our community here in Santa Barbara that care and are loving, kind people that can see beyond the scrappy condition that you happen to be in, and know that you are a traumatized person, and just have enough faith and humanity to help you. I'm getting a little scattered here.
No, you're doing great. Thank you for sharing that, Lynda. And it's really reassuring to know people in the community supported you. Robert.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'd like to comment on a couple things she said. First off, one of the things I had when I first started to become myself again is I had a huge Rip Van Winkle effect on going forward on technology. And it took me a while to learn how to use a phone. As a matter of fact, I didn't learn it until I realized that it wasn't a phone anymore. It was a computer. And once I started treating it like a computer, it was, almost second nature to figure it out. But there are a lot of things like that, even getting up to speed on the newer versions of Windows and things like that. I mean, when I was when I went off the edge, Windows 95 had just come out. So,
Hmm.
um, I had to catch up on that. The computer part was actually pretty easy, but the phone part had me boondoggled for a while. And, probably about 6 months or so before I realized, hey, this isn't a phone anymore. This is a computer. And I would bet that other people have even more, considerably more problems than I have because I'm supposed to be kind of savvy at that stuff. Um, the other thing I'd like to address is it's a lot more violent out there than people think. I mean, I literally, the group of guys that I stayed with first when I came here into Santa Barbara, which about, which was about probably 5, 6 years into my homelessness. Um, all of them are dead. Um, I've seen just horrendous amounts of violence, and it's something that's just there, and you have to deal with it. And nobody realizes, how much the homeless people have to deal with. They don't understand the extent of the pressure and the changes that they have on people, and it renders some people absolutely useless. I mean, they are so mired in their thing that they've just given up, which I can attest to because it eventually I was actually doing I had a whole lot of clients that I had in my previous life uh, amassed, and I actually had some of them calling me up to update their networks and do all that. I had seats stored at the rescue mission for those days. I'd still up for about 3 days, grab a seat at the rescue mission, go down there, do whatever the networking job was, and come back up here. Actually, I was in Ventura at the time when that was. And I finally quit that once when I woke up in an office one morning. I was just hungover, drunk. I'd finished the job and everything was great, but I said, you know what? I think my work might suffer. And that's when I officially just kind of gave up on trying to get off the streets and just wound up, making the best of it. Now, keep in mind, I'm a little bit on the offside, and my intentions change from time to time. But um, it's there's a lot more trauma going on than people realize. They're not just sitting there drunk and happy. They're sitting there running away from the reality that they're surrounded with day to day.
Hmm. Yeah, and it
Yeah,
sounds there's a real disconnect with people in the community and, the feelings of isolation. And I can imagine how difficult those feelings could be. Are there other sort of misconceptions or stereotypes that you all feel, you want to help dismantle or prejudices that you may
I
have
would like to say
experienced?
something there. Uh, recently, very recently, we've heard about the most recent disaster, the hurricanes and the floods, and people packing up their mementos and their uh, emotional attachment to certain items and packing up and putting up a high so they won't float away or get ruined. We homeless people, we've been separated from our homes. Our homes shouldn't float down a river, but we're separated from our homes, and we lost everything that was sentimental and dear to us. Uh, I'll bet you that the people who are now trying to recover from these hurricanes and the effects of climate change are sometimes saying, "Wow, I'm just like I am a homeless person. Oh my God, what about these other people that have been homeless for all these times and I've seen them and I maybe didn't feel enough." But we're not different from anyone else. We're exactly the same. We have all the same feelings, and we've been hurt either by our addictions or our choices. Uh, I don't use drugs and I don't drink, but when in the 60s, I had a little sample of everything, it kind of didn't stick. Well, the marijuana did, and I inhaled until I couldn't do it anymore. And my addiction to marijuana and cigarettes went completely away when I became homeless because
Mm-hmm.
I had to focus on staying alive. And I'm sure that I have a little PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm glad I didn't get it for more. But God bless all the people that helped me. I went to the wellness center behind the Alano Club on Coda and Garden, and I could always get a real good lunch there. There were people that treated us like regular people. We could sing and dance and do karaoke and read books and watch television. It was just absolutely a miracle. It was wonderful. There's so many helpers in Santa Barbara. This is a very special place. It's incredible. The showers of blessing. It's just amazing how this community has come together. And I want to thank this community and all of you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Lynda. I really appreciate that. And the more stories I hear from people who have experienced homelessness, the more I think about just the logistical challenges. And Melinda, you touched upon looking for work, trying to find a place to shower. All of you touch upon how to find meals every day and really sort of just being in survival mode every single day. And I think about how sleep impacts people, right? If I don't sleep well for a night, I don't feel great the next day. Imagine every night for weeks, months, years on end. So Melinda, what sort of kept you going through all those logistical challenges and what drove you to keep through with that?
Well, I think for me, first, I had to get past the disbelief of what's happening. I went to school, I got all the degrees, I saved money, I did everything I was supposed to do. Like, okay, what's going on? And then I decided and while I was fearful and in a hypervigilant state and all of that stuff, but I decided to approach it as if I was on some intense field research project, right? Because as a therapist and as a coach, I was always on the other side of helping people, right? And I would always donate and volunteer at the domestic violence place, at the horse therapy place. I just was always a helper. But now I'm on the other side. So I decided to look at it as, okay, I'm doing field research for whatever my next life is going to look like. And I also had to become creative, right? Because where do I clean up? Where do I get a decent meal? How do I earn enough money to maintain my vehicle? Because this is now my home. And to echo what Lynda was saying, I had my turtle with me. I have a small turtle. And so she was with me in the car. And I felt like if it wasn't for that creature, me having to take care of her and look after her and giving me a reason to keep going, I might have lost my mind a little bit, because there were days where I did have to have a good cry because it was hard. It was difficult. It was exhausting. And, like Lynda said, and like Robert said, we lose our health also because we can't take good care of ourselves. Yeah, we can go to the mission and the pantry and get meals, but that's not consistent and regular. So you have to find ways to become creative in how you take care of yourself. And because I was always, I was always clean, I was dressed well, I'm professional. So of course, I speak well. So everybody would always say, oh, you don't look homeless, right? And my car was, I had a decent car. It was always clean, even though what few things I could keep is whatever I could fit in the trunk. So that's all I had. In the trunk and in the back seat was my whole life and my turtle.
Mm-hmm.
And so no one really knew unless I was going somewhere for some specific service or going to one of the navigation centers for help. But let me tell you, sometimes I just wanted a cup of coffee. Like it was a struggle to even go buy a cup of coffee, as we know how expensive it is these days. And there are so many kind people. When I needed a visor for my car and my caseworker came and said, "Oh, hey, Melinda, we got a few donations," I would just sit there and cry at all this, the small kindnesses of people. And then once, you know, some community members do pay attention and they get involved and they volunteer so they know who's homeless, who's not homeless. They come and work at the navigation centers and they would say, "Oh, hey, Melinda, look, I saved this for you because I thought of you and it was something I needed." And I would just have to sit there and cry in gratitude at all of the kindness and the generosity. And that's what really kept me sane and kept me going and kept my creativity going, because I constantly had to be creative about how to get clean, how to wash my clothes, you know, just simple things that we take for granted every day.
Yeah, and we know that creativity has led to you becoming a writer, and you'll share a poem at the end of our webinar tonight. So, with just a couple of minutes left, I want to give everyone one more chance to share what they would like to see in the community, what changes you hope this inspires people to make, and then we'll go into the pledge that we've created as a coalition of providers and really talk about actionable steps that everyone can take, from the smallest thing of saying hello to someone to exercising your right to vote. So before we go into the pledge, yeah, I would just invite each of you to share what you are hopeful for in terms of change in the community, or what you really want to see be different in something that might have helped you. Maybe we'll start with Robert.
Okay. First off, I'd like to say that things are definitely changing for the better. Um, Believe me, 20 years ago, uh, people weren't as open to even talking to the homeless people out here. I found, you know, from my experience, I found that if I usually got to talk to a person, they would open up a little bit. So I think that's the first thing. Is and lines of communication needs to be established, basically, so that people can find out that, hey, these are real people. They have problems that are a lot more severe than, you know, most people's, and you know, we need to hear what they're saying. You know, there's not a lot of that. It's really, it boils down to communication and respect. Uh, these people are human beings, or at least they were at one time anyway, most of them, and and uh, it's it's frustrating um, when you're talking to somebody and they are looking at you as some piece of dirt that doesn't know anything, you know, couldn't even tie their own shoes or whatever. And that's, but like I said, as I said, it's getting better, but it's not perfect. It's a long way from that.
Definitely. Lynda, how about you? What changes would you like to see?
Wow. That,
That's a
I
big
guess
question.
just more everyday people being involved in caring and realizing that that person out there on the sidewalk is exactly the same as their daughter, their son, their mother, their father. You know, to say hello, wave. If you can't say hello, wave. Say,
Yeah.
"Oh, hi guys, how you doing today? You getting along?" When you're making lunches for your kids, make a couple of extra lunches and just ask maybe, hey, could I have an extra lunch here? Would you like, you know, a peanut butter sandwich, an orange or a banana's in there, or some cookies? Uh, just and supporting the groups that are already functioning, doing whatever they can for the people, like the showers of blessing, like the people that go there to that place where the showers place pulls up, and the other people come and they donate clothing and they talk to the people. And some people come and they've made a lot of food, and the people that have their showers, they can get something to eat. Just, in fact, the showers of blessing would be a really good place to volunteer, or just go there on your own and just walk around and meet people and talk to people, because you know what, they're really grateful, and they're probably at their best right then when they can get a shower and something to eat and some new pair of shoes, or some clothes. And then when you happen to see them out there on the street and they're doing really horrible, you know, you won't be afraid to say, hi, can I help you out somehow? Is there something I could do? Some small thing? I can't do everything. You know, I can't change the world or make the earth spin backwards like Superman, but hey, you know, just be a regular person to the homeless.
Yeah, certainly those small acts of humanity, I think, go a long way. Melinda, anything you'd like to share to conclude?
Yeah, it's funny because as we're talking, I just kind of had this epiphany that just hit me. It's the hardest thing for people experiencing homelessness is the disconnection, which is echoing what Robert and Lynda have said, is the disconnection from the community. And so we're already dealing with a difficult situation with difficult problems, and we're already feeling fear and shame. But on top of that, I believe that us, and I'm including us because I had that experience of being homeless, being a homeless person, I was more afraid of people who were not homeless than they were afraid of me, because I did not want to deal with someone's judgment, fear, prejudice. I didn't need a lecture about what did I do wrong to wind up on the street. And so I had more fear of going someplace and someone recognizing that I was homeless, and then that would create an additional problem for me. So definitely the connection. If you can practice being more kind and generous in your thoughts, in your words, and in your actions.
Very well said. Thank you to all of you for sharing your stories, or a portion of it. You know, your lives are complex and there's so much that is involved. Your episode of homelessness is one part of your life. It doesn't define you, doesn't define your identity, but it clearly has shaped a lot of your perspectives. And, you know, we're all appreciative that you all have a safe place to call home now. I think everyone deserves a safe, affordable, comfortable place to lay their head at night. And to really leave everyone on this call with some actionable items, we invite you to sign a pledge. We created a pledge as a coalition to provide you with examples of things that you could do in your everyday life to support our neighbors experiencing homelessness. So we'll put that link in the chat. There's things like share something that you learned today with 3 people, right? Some takeaway. Have a complex, deeper conversation around homelessness. We often have very surface level conversations. Oh yeah, it's really bad. Oh wow, people are in crisis. Oh, that's really sad. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about the human experience, talk about what we could do as people to support folks. You know, smile. You all said, say hello, engage, talk to people, right? Offer to maybe take someone to get a warm cup of coffee. We know how expensive it is, as you were sharing, Lynda. We also put in a really great resource guide in there. So there's all these different organizations that were part of today's event, really helped put together a list of ways that you could volunteer or support or donate these organizations. There's lots of things going on, as Kimberlee mentioned too, a lot of really great organizations and people working in this space, but they of course always need more support and resources. So you can volunteer your time, talent, or treasure. That's always greatly appreciated. We also have information about the upcoming election because we know that there's a number of ways that housing and homelessness is impacted by our local government all the way up to the presidential level. In Santa Barbara, Measure I, right, will help. It's a sales tax that will support city services, including homeless services. So it's really important to stay informed on those topics. We really encourage folks to speak out against harmful stereotypes and prejudice against people experiencing homelessness. And we really just encourage you all to stay engaged, right? This is a dialogue, it's a conversation, it's not just a one and done. So there's so much more to unpack, but I really want to thank all of you on this call for being part of this evening and for really being vulnerable and being willing to share your story in a way that inspires others to take action. So this is an invitation for everyone to sign the pledge, to step up in the ways that you can, because everyone can play a part and be part of our solutions to homelessness. So today is World Homelessness Day, as we talked about. We know people around the world are, challenged with the lack of housing and living unsheltered, but we know particularly in the Santa Barbara community, there's much more work to be done. So this is a commitment from all of us to continue that work. And to close us out and leave us on a note of inspiration, I'd like to invite Melinda to share one of her poems.
Sure. Okay. It's a poem from my book called Love Speaks, and it's called Grace. And it says, "Here I am, Lord, an empty vessel. Fill me with your divine grace, the grace of faith that can move mountains and know all things are possible, the grace of wisdom to know what is best for me, the grace of compassion for my fellow creatures, the grace of forgiveness and for myself and others, the grace of courage to move forward in the face of fear, the grace to be of service in this world. Fill me with your divine grace, Lord, the grace of love. Fill me with you." Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy your night and please sign the pledge. And we look forward to staying engaged with all of you in this work together.
Have a pleasant evening.
Bye-bye.